We're going to call this meeting to order. This is the 16th meeting, the Standing Committee on Aboriginal Affairs and Northern Development. Today we are pursuing our study of supplementary C estimates for 2013 and 2014. We have the privilege of being joined by the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs, Minister Valcourt. We want to thank you for being here. Being with us today, we also have the Deputy Minister, Mr. Michael Warnock, as well as Pamela Dion. Thank you so much for joining us as well, who is the Acting Chief Financial Officer. Thanks all of you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us this afternoon. Minister, we'll turn it over to you for your opening statement, and then of course we will have some questions for you to follow up on that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, for inviting me and my officials to outline our department supplementary estimate C for 2013-14. But before I do, and you a bit alluded to it, I want to thank committee members for the valuable role they play in ensuring that Canadian tax dollars are used wisely and are achieving their intended results. Among them, jobs, yes, economic opportunities, and long-term prosperity for Aboriginal and Northerners. Now, I would also note that, as this committee, I'm sure, sees, our government is currently pursuing a heavy legislative agenda related to Aboriginal peoples and the North, and I want to express my gratitude to the committee, to this committee, for its ongoing work in moving this agenda forward. Now, Mr. Chair, from the many local projects, the roads and water systems, the schools and connectivity projects, to initiatives aimed at large-scale reforms such as the recently announced First Nation Control of First Nation Education Act, or the Northwest Territories Land and Resource Devolution Agreement, our government is delivering on its commitment to create jobs and economic opportunities for Aboriginal and Northern communities. We remain, of course, focused on ensuring that Aboriginal peoples are an integral part of our government's broader jobs and economic growth agenda, while building a renewed relationship with First Nations people. And I believe we've made important progress in that vein. Areas where we have seen significant improvements are skills and training, education, economic development, claim resolution, and removing barriers to better governance. Grâce à notre travail avec des
and through work with willing partners, carefully targeted investments, legislation, as well as claims agreements, we continue to take the concrete steps necessary to create the conditions for stronger, more self-sufficient Aboriginal and Northern communities. Through these estimates, as you can see in the supplementary estimate C, we are continuing to make strategic and targeted investments, in this instance in the amount of $72.4 million directed at shared priorities that we have with First Nations, Inuit, Métis, and Northerners. For example, these supplementary estimates earmark $36.1 million to meet the Government of Canada's obligations under the Northwest Territories Lands and Resources Devolution Agreement, which I had the privilege of signing in Inuvik last June on behalf of the Government of Canada, along with the Government of the Northwest Territories and 5 Aboriginal partners. This historic agreement, Mr. Chair, gives Northerners greater control over their own lands and resources, all the while unlocking the economic potential of the region by modernizing the existing regulatory regime. This will strengthen environmental stewardship and protection and ensure that the Northwest Territories remains an attractive place to live, to work, and to invest. Mr. Chair, there is another subject that's of great interest to us. It is the health and safety of First Nations communities. It is a priority of our government. To that end, as you can see in the supplementary estimates, $33.2 million from our supplementary estimates will address health and safety concerns that are related to flooding and to other natural disasters that have occurred in First Nations communities in 2013.
Of serious weather-related incidents this past year put First Nations residents at risk, including flooding in Saskatchewan and floods and storm surges in the Atlantic region. Several communities in northern Manitoba and Ontario also had to be evacuated due to forest fires. Funds allocated in these supplementary estimates go towards provinces, territories, or other organizations that incurred costs in both responding to and recovering from these emergency situations. In November 2013, I also announced a new comprehensive approach to emergency management that will better protect the health and safety of First Nations living on reserve. And this new approach will simplify the current process by creating a new single window for First Nations to secure funding for emergency costs. And this will eliminate overlap and provide First Nations and provinces and territories improved access to emergency funding when needed. As well, we are revising the Emergency Management Assistance Program to strengthen program management and provide greater clarity about expense eligibility. We are also providing, within that reform, $19.1 million to negotiate and implement a new or renewed agreements with the provinces and territories that support emergency preparedness. This includes the development of emergency management plans for First Nation communities that will provide for timely, effective, and efficient support in time of crisis. A further important initiative funded through the supplementary estimates is the new Center of Excellence for Matrimonial Real Property. A portion of the $1 million will be provided to the center to implement and enforce the Family Homes on Reserves and Matrimonial Interest or Rights Act. And I was pleased to be in Vancouver this past December, Mr. Chair, to announce its coming into force and mark another important milestone towards ensuring that families living on reserve have access to the same basic rights and protections as all other Canadians in the case of marriage breakdown, common law partnership, or divorce, protections that they have been without for nearly 3 decades. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chairman, we know that young people in First Nations are the segment of the Canadian population which at present is growing the most quickly. And this is why we are concerned for them. We want them to obtain their diplomas but unfortunately their graduation rate is amongst the lowest in the country. And for this reason, we are investing $1 million at the Purdy Crawford University in Cape Breton to establish a chair in Aboriginal business studies to encourage business studies by Aboriginal students. This money, which was announced in last year's Economic Action Plan, will enable more young people to develop business, investment, and corporate skills to spur economic development in Aboriginal communities right across this country. Mr. Chair, as you can see, the expenditures that are detailed in the supplementary estimates are vital for the lives and livelihoods of Aboriginal people and Northerners. They are key to improving their standard of living and also their quality of life, and continued economic development, jobs, as well as growth. I look forward now, Mr. Chair, to answering your questions that arise from my presentation to you. I am here with my officials, ready to answer any question you may have with respect to Supplementary Estimate C. Thank you.
With Ms. Crowder for the first 7 minutes.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Mr. Minister. It's always a pleasure to see you before the committee. I think part of the challenge for us as committee members is that we get this document called Report on Plans and Priorities that set out the direction for the coming fiscal year, and then we get various estimates that actually don't talk about whether the department is achieving what it set out in its plans and priorities. And in your speech, you mentioned the fact that one of the initiatives was that you were continuing to work with partners and so on with regards to claims agreements. And so I wonder if you could update us on page 32 in the plans and priorities, because I didn't see it in the supplementary Cs, and I can't tell if the department has spent money on this. But in the plans and priorities, there was a commitment to continue to advance negotiations on administrative justice, and specifically talked about the Teslin and Tlingit Council First Nation. I wonder if you could tell me whether funds have been committed to the administration of justice agreement for Teslin.
Well, you know, I'm here to discuss the Sub-C, and I'm afraid I'll have the chance to come back to talk about the estimate for the current.
No, this was estimates for last year, though. It was mentioned specifically in the plans for this year, and the only reason I raised it was because in your speech you talked about claims agreements, and of course the Teslin and Tlingit Justice Agreement was part of a claims agreement. And since you were mentioning that you made this commitment, I wonder if you can't update us today. I wonder if the department could tell us if money has been spent on the administration of justice agreement with Teslin and Tlingit, if they could provide that to us in writing, if you aren't able to answer that today.
I'll ask my deputy to answer.
I'm not familiar with the status of that specific agreement, so we'll provide it in writing to the clerk.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you. Mr. Minister, in your speech, you also mentioned that we are also providing $19.1 million to negotiate and implement new or renewed agreements with regards to emergency preparedness. But when I look at the supplementary Cs, I don't see the emergency preparedness. Is that $19.1 million that you mentioned? Was that what was in the main estimates?
Do that.
The supplementary estimates identifies $33.2 million for funding related to the emergency response and recovery funding to our partners that was incurred during 2013.
Right. I understand that piece, but you also in your speech mentioned $19.1 million.
Yes.
And I assume that's not included in the supplementary Cs, but that's money that
Correct.
was already profiled, and you're just talking about what the government had already committed
Right.
to.
Correct.
Right. So that
Actually,
money.
if I could just correct, you will see it in the mains for the next year, because we've shifted the program around, as the minister said, in November, so that there'll be more money going into prevention and planning and exercising, and hopefully less in future years on recovery and response.
But the $33.2 million that's profiled in the sub-Cs has nothing to do with emergency management on
that's
reserves,
all,
not prevention, not mitigation.
No, it's recovery and rebuilding. It's reimbursing the department for money that we put out to help the communities last year.
So the supplementary Cs is not dealing with the serious concerns raised in the Auditor General's report with the fact that the $19 million that was profiled was insufficient to deal with emergency preparedness.
No, that has been responded to, and you will see that in the main estimates for 14-15.
Okay. So with regards to the reprofiling of the estimates, again, my understanding is that this is not any new money. What's happening is that money that was already allocated in the department is being reallocated.
That is correct.
For which, sorry? The 19 is reallocated. Yep.
No, but in the supplementary Cs, my understanding is that the money, there is no new money. It's being reprofiled within the department.
No, it is new money to the department, but we don't need to ask Parliament for a full appropriation of it because of we've got an advance from Treasury Board, and then we don't need to ask you to vote the appropriation. But it is net new money for that purpose.
It's net new money to the department.
For that purpose, yes.
So the total authorities to date and the total estimates to date don't look a lot different.
Pam will help me on this, but in some cases we have an authority, which is sort of a ceiling for a whole bunch of programs, and if we don't need all of the money in a given year, then we don't have to come to Parliament for a particular
I understand that. So what I'm saying is the money's been reprofiled. Like, so for example, there was $33 million for schools. Now, it's hard to believe that the department couldn't spend the $33 million that was already allocated. Like, this was money that was reprofiled from the budget 2012. Is that correct?
In a vote 10 of almost $6 billion, yes, there is some slippage across about 50 different programs, yes.
So I'm just wondering why it was that the department couldn't get the money out the door for schools. We know that there's a long list of schools that need to be built or renovated or remediated in some way. What prevented the department from getting that money out the door?
You only pay as the projects are proceeding. You don't pay in advance. The projects are built by the First Nation. They do the contracting, they do the building, and we reimburse them in progress payments as things start. So each project is its own little project management challenge. Sometimes it's slow down in the tendering process, the availability of suppliers. We had a delay in one project because winter road problems in northern Manitoba.
Okay, so what is it that the department could do to make sure that money is fully expended given the huge demand for schools?
We manage every project as intensively as we can with the First Nations who are doing the building. And what we're trying to encourage, but not force, is as much as possible standardized design, using the same blueprints more than once, bundled projects. If we can do 4 projects in one tender, we'll do it that way. If there was a good modular design built in one part of the country, suggest that they use the same design instead of starting from scratch. Move along the land processes. Anything we can do to speed it up, I assure you we try to do.
Am I done?
Thank you. We'll turn to Mr. Leaf now for the next round of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good to see you here on the committee, Minister. I'm sure you know that in, I guess it was January, we went into Yellowknife to hear witnesses on Bill C-15, and I'm looking over your supplementary estimate C in respect to the Northwest Territories Devolution Act. Of course, we've heard from people like Premier Bob McLeod, who said that this Devolution Act could be a game changer for the people of the Northwest Territories, and as a Yukon Member of Parliament, have certainly experienced the benefits that our territory has gained through devolution over the 10-year period that we've enjoyed those benefits. There's approximately $36 million allocated to help implement the devolution agreement. I was just wondering if you can let the committee know what the progress looks like in terms of the implementation of the devolution agreement, and how it will increase economic opportunities for the people of the North.
Well, as you may remember, I mean, I was in Inuvik on June 25th, I think, in order to sign the agreement on behalf of the Government of Canada, with the Government of the Northwest Territories and 5 Aboriginal groups who signed the final agreement. And after, you've done the work here, after passing through the House before Christmas, C-15 was referred to the Senate. And just yesterday, Senator Neufeld tabled a very favorable report on the Senate Committee on Energy, the Environment and Natural Resources. So we've been making excellent progress on implementation, and I fully expect that we will be able indeed to meet the target date of April 1st. Now, the $36.1 million that you mentioned was received in the supplementary estimate C for devolution, will allow for the department to cover one-time costs that are associated with the transition and thereby satisfy our obligations in the Northwest Territories Devolution Agreement. That was an undertaking of Canada. Of that 36.1 million, there is 20.1 million, which is 20.5, which is a recovery of grant payments that were internally cash managed in Supplementary Estimate B and paid to the government of the Northwest Territories to offset their one-time costs associated with devolution. And the economic opportunities that this act proposes to bring to the North are vast and well documented. You know what has been the experience in your own Yukon, and we are hopeful that starting April 1st, the Northwest Territories see a new day.
Oh, thank you. So, I mean, 36 million, in particular, the volume set aside for one-time costs is obviously a significant investment. So, maybe can you put in perspective for us how long the people and the leaders of the Northwest Territories have been working toward this devolution agreement, and why is this agreement such an important milestone in the lives of the people of the Northwest Territories?
Well, I mean, when you go back, I mean, the people in the Northwest Territories have waited for a long time for that day. If you go back, this started almost 80 years ago, when with successive devolution agreements covering other aspects of local governance, including education, healthcare, social services, and the bill that we have passed, and which I understand is about to become law, has been in the making for over 25 years. So in 2001, the Government of Canada and the Government of the Northwest Territories and the Aboriginal Summit, which was the body representing the 7 regional Aboriginal organizations, concluded a memorandum of intent on devolution. In 2002, all parties commenced devolution discussion and concluded a framework agreement. 2011, a devolution agreement in principle was signed in January, and it was in March 2013, if I recall, that the Prime Minister came to the Northwest Territories, where the agreement in principle, the consensus agreement was reached, which led to the introduction of the bill that will result in this being in effect on April 1st, 2014. So it's been a long way, but I think that the donors of the territory can be proud on April 1st, because now they will be the architect of their own future.
Well, Minister, I'd like to congratulate you on getting something close to finish. Now, we won't preempt it. We're getting near the finish line, but certainly, as you've articulated, 80 years of attempts to bring this historic agreement to fruition for the people of the Northwest Territories is certainly a monumental achievement. So, congratulations on working well with your GNWT partners to make this happen. I understand that NWT is mirroring some federal legislation to prepare for the assumption of control on April 1. Can you share with the committee what steps are being taken to ensure investor and stakeholder confidence in this transition period?
Well, as I've mentioned, the activities required to implement the devolution agreement are now well advanced. I mean, we're really making good progress to meet the target date of April 1st. ANC's pre-April 1st, 2014 obligations include one-time funding to the government of the Northwest Territories, as I've said, and Aboriginal groups. Notifications to private sector interest, Aboriginal consultations, introduction of legislation in Parliament, transfer of records, transfer of assets, human resources, creation of inventories and of waste, operating sites, the excluded lands. There's a lot of work taking place. And coming back to those one-time costs, the majority of because we too have one-time costs as a department, and they are associated with the payments to employees pursuant to the Federal Workforce Adjustment Directive, which we must respect. We've made extensive efforts to ensure that the proper human resource and infrastructure systems are in place to allow for this smooth transition, which is proving to work. And the payments of ongoing devolution funding to the government of the Northwest Territories and for Aboriginal groups will commence in 2014-15, and this is not part of these estimates, but that will be in the main. And the government of the Northwest Territories will receive $67.3 million in ongoing funding through an increase to the gross expenditure-based portion of the territorial formula financing, with ANC entering into grant agreements with the government for $3.6 million for obligations associated with transferred land claim obligations, and with Aboriginal groups for the $4.6 million identified in ongoing funding for those groups. So that would be the extent of how the stakeholders can build the confidence that this transition is taking place effectively.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. We'll turn now to Ms. Bennett for the next round of questions.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Minister. As you know, there were concerns in Budget 2014 that the money invested in education that was to complement the Act doesn't flow for at least a year in infrastructure and implementation, and even longer than that to close the gap. So there's a huge concern and lack of trust that money flow. So although your deputy answered my colleague's question, I would like to know, you as minister, when Budget 2012 said that it invested $175 million over 3 years, so that's less than $60 million a year for infrastructure in schools, how do you as the minister explain that you've reprofiled $33 million of it that isn't going to schools?
Well, I mean, specific to the budget of 2012, okay? School initiatives, this reprofile of $33 million, has been requested and approved for 2013-14 because of the number of delays that the deputy has referred to. I mean, it's all right to have the appropriation and the authorization of Parliament to spend the money, but you have got to be able to spend the money. And in this specific instance, we had, in the case of Shamatawa, the winter road access prevented the bringing of the materials, so you cannot proceed with the school construction. We had natural disasters such as flooding for Siksika in Alberta, where you can't build, during a storm or because all the infrastructure is damaged thereafter. And, if the truth be known, some of those delays are result from the negotiation with certain First Nation communities because of the project scope, which could not be agreed on. So although these commitments are there to build the schools, it must be done within, of course, the confine of what is possible, and instead of the money lapsing, it is simply reprofiled so that we may continue on these specific projects. And if I may, I'd like to give you another example. For example, again, in the 2012...
But, Minister, these are just sort of excuses for why it didn't flow. I mean, I'd like to know really how many schools have you been to see in the country where, I mean, these are a disaster. The kids are sick. They're empty. I've been in many schools across the country where the school's closed for the week because everybody's sick. This is an urgent thing. Well, and you have $60 million a year, and you've lapsed 33.
You know, you know, I'm afraid, with all due respect, that you exaggerate the situation. I've been to many schools with kids speaking their native language in grade settings, and
Minister,
not all schools are.
Minister, 175 isn't even close to the need, and over 3 years, you know, it's not even close to the need, and yet people can't understand how you can't even get this 33 out the door.
Well, I've explained why, because that money was committed to certain
But Minister,
projects.
you can fix the process.
Well, I cannot fix the temperature. I cannot impose the scope of a school on a First Nation. We respect one another. We dialogue. We discuss. And unfortunately, you know, I will not impose on First Nations anything that we cannot agree on.
But is this not just more paternalism? Why can't you just let the money go out the door and let if the road doesn't work, it'll get, you know, I mean, they're going to get, they need that school built.
You know, just let the money out the door. You know, I know that your party, you believe that the budget balance itself, but we don't. So we have to be careful with taxpayer dollars, and we have to respect taxpayers by ensuring that those investments are made according to not only the rule of law, but that they
Minister,
make sense.
are you saying that when you saw this number of 33 million lapsed on education, on school infrastructure, that you didn't ask your department what on earth happened?
Well, first of all, I will correct you. That money doesn't lapse. It's been reprofiled, and yes, indeed.
It didn't go to schools.
No, but it didn't lapse. Okay, the money is being reprofiled so that
Not
it can
away
be
from
spent,
schools.
so that it can be spent in the next fiscal year. Now, you ask whether what I did when I saw it, the first question I asked was, how come, you know, with all the needs we have, that we haven't spent 33 million? And the answer is the one you've been provided with. These are unavoidable circumstances, like weather, like circumstances that prevented the spending of the money. And what is important here is that we make sure that these funds that are targeted for school construction be for school construction, and it will happen, but maybe you know, in this next fiscal year.
Minister, there's money that was really, you know, barely just over $1 million profiled here for matrimonial property on reserve and implementing the Act. From all the testimony we had at committee, from Wendy Grant-John and report, it seems that everybody knew the Act alone was not going to be enough to keep women safe, and that there needed to be more money for shelters. There needed to be more money for policing in communities. There needed to be, so in this little bit of money that you've got there for implementing the Act, I don't see anything for shelters. I don't see anything to help with increasing policing, or so it's, and I guess so what actually is that money going to do? I mean, what are the training and education, you know, activities, key officials? I mean, and again, I guess that people are wondering about what will the Centre of Excellence do when there's such great need in communities, particularly right now in Alberta, where the Alberta shelters are really crying for help.
Thank you, Ms. Bennett.
That this money is going to other things.
Ms. Bennett, you're out of time, but I do want to give the minister an opportunity to answer, so we'll turn it to the minister.
Okay, thank you. I'll be brief. This is about the Matrimonial Interest or Rights Act. It's not about shelters. It's about implementing an act of Parliament, and the funding of $1 million will consist of some $216,000 for operating expenditures to support the implementation of the Act, a public education and awareness campaign of $142,000, the operation of a Center of Excellence for Matrimonial Real Property, $529,000, and training and education for judges and legal experts, $125,000. And I want to point that this act has come into force recently, and these are funds for the fiscal year 2013-14, and in the main you will see that there are other investments that will be made for your other concerns that you've mentioned.
Thank you very much. We'll turn to Mr. Dreeshen now for the next 7 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, for being here. It's been a few years since I was on Aboriginal Affairs, but I'm happy to be back. And during that time, I was on public accounts, so I had some opportunities to go through some of the numbers over the years, and again to take a look at some of the Auditor General's reports. And of course, I'm pleased to see that all of the recommendations were agreed to by your department to make sure that that we actually are able to deal with the issues that are there as far as emergency management on reserve is concerned. Dealing with the annex that was supplied, Sup C, I noticed that there's $33.2 million they're funding for on-reserve costs, so I'm wondering, I know that in November you were in Winnipeg and you announced the changes for this, and I was just wondering if perhaps you could take a look at how these the streamlining has taken place to this funding, and how there's greater cooperation now able to take place with provinces and territories. And if you can, as I say, just fine-tune a little bit of these details to find out how we can get some greater certainty for First Nations that are dealing with emergencies.
Well, you know, we've brushed the topic a bit earlier. You know, as you stated, I was in Winnipeg to announce this new comprehensive approach to emergency management on reserve. And you know what was important, because after the summer, especially with the flood in Alberta. Okay, we saw in Alberta, the province with whom we have an agreement. Okay, and you know, je lève mon chapeau, I raise my hat to the First Nations affected and the Alberta government and our department for how this situation was handled. But that was done because it was done pursuant to a solid agreement, which you know, we will use and build on into these other agreements we propose to enter with the provinces. One of the big issues that the provincial governments and First Nations were facing was the fact that you know, we were under the public safety disaster financial arrangement. And for the provinces, for the First Nation to access the fund, they had to go through public safety. And then the province had to go again through public safety, but come to us for what was on reserve, because sometimes it, you know, so there was overlap. And so anyway, with this single window, new single window approach for First Nations to secure funding for emergency costs, we will, and what we did, you know, is build on the 4 pillars of emergency management, such that now we will have resources to ensure that we address all 4 of them. You know, recovery, preparedness, mitigation, and preparedness, mitigation, recovery, and which is the 4th one? Response. Yeah. response and recovery. They go together. Anyway, and we have, but in these estimates, okay, here today, it's not about that. These are for investments that we've had to make because of those flood and fires that occurred in those provinces this summer.
Thank you very much. And again, I had opportunity to be out at Siksika and in the West Country and saw the damage that was there, and certainly the response was amazing. So I thank you for that. I guess the other question that I would like to speak about, and as a former educator, I was extremely pleased to see the First Nations Control of First Nations Education Act, and I'm looking forward to seeing where that is going to take us. But in your presentation, you spoke of the Purdy Crawford Chair in Aboriginal Business Studies at Cape Breton University. And again, when I was here many years ago, had opportunities to talk to some amazing individuals in the Aboriginal community that were really moving forward as far as business is concerned. So I'm just wondering if you can kind of talk about how this Aboriginal participation can be helpful for the Canadian economy.
Well, you see, and I'm glad you raised it, because I also had the privilege of being here over 20 years ago. And when, we were talking about post-secondary education, very, very few of those Aboriginal youth had the opportunity or the chance to pursue post-secondary education. And, we currently invest, over $300 million annually for post-secondary education funding, including support for the development and delivery of college and university level courses for First Nations and Inuit students. And this funding here to Purdy is intended to promote interest among Canada's Aboriginal people in the study of business at the post-secondary level, support research specific to Aboriginal communities, curriculum development, and mentoring program. And the funding agreement with the university in this instance is already in place. So the department is ready to honor the government's commitment to that contribution. And hopefully this initiative, not huge, but meaningful and significant, will help build a brighter future, I hope, for Aboriginal youth, and help promote the independence and economic self-reliance for Aboriginal communities.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll turn now to Mr. Jenny Jordan for the next questions.
Mr. Minister, in your presentation, you indicated that some $36.1 million was included in Supplementary Estimate C to respect the government's obligations under the transfer devolution agreement. I would ask the Minister if these funds, and is this going to be able to cover the abandoned mines and various other sites? Will this cover what has to be done there? Answer, no. No, it's not covered. It's not in the supplementary estimates, but these are obligations that have been undertaken by the federal government. Now, Mr. Minister, I see that some $22.3 million under Vote 10, and also some $12.1 million under Vote 1 dealing with contaminated sites, federal contaminated sites. There are agreements that will lapse as of 31st March. The ultimate figure that I see here is some $35 million. Under your agreement, how much will the contaminated sites coverage and the abandoned sites be dealt with? How much money will that require? What would your estimate be? Well, I listen, estimating the cost this. What the supplementary estimates demonstrate in the case of these abandoned sites or contaminated sites is that these monies that have been spent in 2013, 2014, but it has nothing to do with the overall cost, the total cost for remediating these contaminated or abandoned sites. As of March 31st, 2013, the program was already dealing with the cleanup of certain sites. I don't have the figures before me, but if you like, I can give you these figures. The Contaminated Sites Action Plan, it covers some 100 contaminated sites, maybe more, and the $22.2 billion overall is involved in this plan. What you are seeing here is these amounts that we just call as at home peanuts. Small amounts that have to be invested to protect safety and the security of the environment. So under the transfer agreement for devolution to the Northwest Territories, that you're saying that there's nothing that's really going to be dealing with the abandoned mine sites or the contaminated sites, even though it's an obligation of the Crown. I just wanted to know if, at the very least, it had been highlighted and something would be done. No, listen. I say $2.3 billion for the 100 or so sites. We can certainly give you information about that. It's available on the anticipated cost for those sites that have already been evaluated. Yes. How much time do I have left? Here we're talking about sites that have been retained by Canada for which they accept responsibility. Well, just how many sites are there in actual fact, Mr. Minister? Oh my goodness, in the north, throughout the north, about 100. 100? Thank you. I'll share my time with my colleague here.
Well, what can I say in 40 seconds? Maybe just to stay on the same theme. I'm just wondering, because when we're looking at the decontaminated sites, I mean, Wikwemikong First Nation is one of those First Nations that has sites, and it's the oil wells. And so I guess in figuring out these dollar amounts and in figuring out how the government should actually make sure that those dollars are spent wisely, why is it that when there are so many other wells that need to be capped, that money, while the machinery is already there, because the cost is the machinery to put on there, the machinery is already there, and the cost to have them capped, have the other ones capped, would have been much cheaper. So I'm just trying to figure out how we can justify these, not moving ahead on some of these projects while the machinery is already there.
I mean, you know, again here, what is happening, I mean, the reason for reprofiling these $35 million is because of the delays that necessarily follow or accompany these technical, regulatory, and procurement challenges. I mean, we're in the north. These are very complex site to remediate, you know, whether you're talking about Giant Mine or Bull Moose Root Mines or United Canoe Hill Mine and Greater Bear Lake Mines. All of these were delayed due to technical, regulatory, and procurement challenges. Now, what is important is that we cannot use the money that is appropriated for these sites to just be shifted to others, because of course we have to continue the work there, and so you know, those delay in the finalization of the work taking place does result in certain funds not being spent, which have to be reprofiled, which were reprofiled.
Thank you, Minister. We'll turn to Mr. Seaback for the next round of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Minister, I know you touched on it briefly in some of your remarks already today, but I do notice that in the SUPs we have 2 allocations for the implementation of the matrimony and real property rights legislation. Now, I know that only received royal assent late last year. Can you give us an idea on the progress you're making towards this implementation?
Well, as I indicated earlier, this, in December, we announced the creation of the Center of Excellence for Matrimonial Real Property, and this group will be instrumental into helping First Nations to adopt the laws that they deem necessary to protect and provide these rights to those families on reserve. Necessarily, there's got to be a campaign to inform First Nations about the benefits of this legislation. Right now, and as you know, the Act has come into force in December, but the provisional rules, the federal provisional rules, will only come into effect 1 year after, that is in December 2014. So at that time, those First Nations that do not have their own matrimonial property laws will be subjected to the federal act. And at this time, as we speak, we don't have many First Nations, if at all, who have shown interest into passing their own legislation. But then I attribute this to the fact that the Center of Excellence is taking its breath, starting to operate, and will be able to give more and better information and sample to First Nations so that they can get on it for the benefit of the families living on reserve.
I think it's an excellent piece of legislation, and I think it will make a real difference. Other than the obvious benefits, why do you think it's an important piece of legislation?
Well, it is important because for too long, other Canadians, members of families or common law relationship, or even in the case of death, we take for granted as people living off reserve the benefits of the matrimonial property rights that we all enjoy. And, I just can fathom, the situation. So many attempts have been made for years to try to solve this problem. I happen to have been practicing family law when it was decided by the Supreme Court that these laws did not apply on reserve. So now, in our I could call it the action plan to protect women and children on reserve. Now they enjoy the same rights that all other Canadians do. And I think that was important to be done. And now we are in the process of implementation, and I trust that the Center of Excellence, along with all First Nation communities across the country, will pull together to ensure that this be efficiently and effectively implemented for the benefit of women, children, and everyone living on reserve.
I'll share my final bit of time with Mr. Straw.
Thank you, Mr. Seaback and Mr. Minister, for being here. Just one of the lines here mentions funding for out-of-court settlements. I'm wondering if you could indicate how many settlements that might have been, or give us examples of either you or the officials what that refers to.
Well, in the instant case, this 1,023,023 1 million over included in the SUP this was for an out-of-court settlement for which Canada and the plaintiff reached an agreement. It was the Paul Band First Nation versus HMTQ, and it's an out-of-court settlement that was reached, and this was to effect that settlement.
Thank you. We'll turn now to Ms. Hughes for the next rounds of questions.
Thank you very much. And so, so my question, and then I'm going to share my time with my colleague, Mrs. Crowder. You mentioned, you referenced the First Nation Control of First Nation Education Act, and the need for First Nations, or the continued to take concrete steps necessary to create the conditions for strong and more self-sufficient Aboriginal and Northern communities. And yet we see there was a press release dated March 5th here about the program for early childhood intervention program and the funding that's being stopped. It's saying that the funding is to be cut at the end of June. So I'm just wondering if in fact that funding is being cut, and is it being reallocated somewhere else? Yes.
Ms. Hughes, I just want to, I didn't hear the reference to the estimates with regards to that.
Well, the minister has mentioned the First Nation education piece, so I'm just wondering if that is part of the First Nation education. And there is a little bit of flexibility usually when the minister is here, right?
Absolutely. But I just, I thought we were diverting maybe completely off the subject material. But Minister, maybe if you...
Well, I'd like to know to what you are referring.
It's the early intervention program.
Where?
In Saskatchewan, in Saskatoon. This was a press release in Saskatoon. It says.
Oh, okay, the press again. Okay.
So that's why I was asking you, is that this came out, and I'm just wondering if in fact this funding, the early childhood intervention program funding, is being cut. It says that it's going to be done at the end of June. So I'm just wondering if that is in fact the case.
I mean, this has got to do with the next, the estimate and the spending for the next fiscal year, but it has got nothing to do with the subsidy before us. When we talk about the reprofiling, it's got nothing to do with that. So as to the amount of money that is invested for childhood and family services, that is in the main estimate, but this year, which is the year we are concerned with, I believe I can safely say that there have been no cuts to that program.
So in fact, there won't be a cut to the early childhood intervention program.
Talking about the year 2013-14 as to 2014-15, I'll be able to discuss that when we do the estimate.
Okay, so I can't get an answer, so I'll pass it over to my colleague.
Yeah, I have a question that is in the subsidies, and it's with regards to treaty land entitlement. And I know that there was money reprofiled from Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and I wonder, first of all, what that impact was, and whether or not there was any consideration of using that money around the creation of urban reserves within the TLE process, because we know that there is a lot of demand.
No, you know, this is the implementation of the treaty land entitlement agreements, and you know, it is working, of course, with First Nation in Manitoba to meet these outstanding treaty land entitlement obligations. The reprofiled funds of, in the case of Manitoba, it's 1.8 million, are federal payments set out in the Manitoba Framework Agreement, treaty land entitlement for Fox Lake Cree Nation, Shamatawa First Nation, and CCZ Dene First Nation. And these First Nations, for whom this money is there, must first sign their treaty entitlement agreements before we can disperse the fund.
But we know that there's significant delays in having the TLEs move ahead. The Auditor General report from a few years back was very critical of the department. So my question still is, couldn't that money have been used for some other TLEs?
Well, you know, just to be fair to the process with respect to treaty land entitlement acres available for acquisition or selection by First Nations, approximately 40% of land has been converted to reserve status in Manitoba, with close to 9,000 acres remaining to be converted. And with respect,
urban reserves? Does that include urban reserves in those numbers?
it can, but it doesn't mean that, you know, they were all urban or not. Some of it may be urban reserve. But when you talk about treaty land entitlement, you know, if you look, for example, with respect to those those acres currently selected and or acquired by First Nations in Manitoba for addition to reserve under the treaty and land entitlement agreement, approximately 61% has been converted to reserve status, with close to 370,000 acres remaining to be converted. Now, if you want to know how much of these acres have gone to urban, I'm sure we could provide you with the information. And the backlog?
Yeah.
Well, it's not so much the backlog, I mean, you know, work is taking place all the time. I think we've made serious progress in recent years, and we are continuing because, you know, this over 1 million acre that is provided for in the Manitoba Treaty Land Entitlement Framework Agreement. So I think we're making good progress.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, again, we want to thank you for the time that you've taken out of your day to spend with us. That went very quickly, but it is more than an hour, so we do appreciate you being here. We'll suspend colleagues and we'll return momentarily with the officials.
Okay, thank you.
Meeting suspended.
Okay.
We'll call the meeting back to order. We do want to thank our officials for staying. I think we've recognized that most of the questions that were wanting to be asked have been asked to the Minister. We want to thank you. We also want to just simply remind you that there was a commitment to get back to Ms. Crowder with regards to information on one of the questions. I don't think there's anything. Oh, pardon me. Maybe it was Monsieur Genet-Jourdain. There may have been some.
Le ministre a également indiqué qu'il me.
The minister also stated that he would respond to my some of my questions in writing as well with further details.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. A general comment that might be helpful on a couple of the questions, because there were a lot of questions about why didn't you just move money from one thing to another within the year, and it's a fair question. Just the basic ground rules are that once you have voted money and it's been appropriated for certain purposes, Treasury Board makes sure that the money is spent for the purposes that Parliament allocated it, and you cannot just I don't have the authority to just move money willy-nilly from one thing to another. We usually have to go through Treasury Board to move money from one thing to another, and in many cases we'll have to come to Parliament to make those changes. Those often show up in supplementary estimates. So we try to squeeze out every value that we can, but sometimes money has to move from one year to another, and sometimes it does move within programs within the department's overall appropriation. But
thank you. And again, I think that if we can get some information back that was committed. I do appreciate you being here. Colleagues, these estimates have been reported back to the House, and therefore we will adjourn and see everybody in a couple of weeks. Meeting adjourned.